I'll lead us in. Also, just in case you're not confused, Jake, this episode is coming out on the 27th. That's next Monday, and that's the day after the election. So we're just going to pretend that we know what the results are.
Funny.
No, it's a good change of pace. Like, it's like Jan BOOMER-mann's still going to be Jan BOOMER-mann no matter what happens. So,
yeah, pretty much. Nothing changes.
I did a podcast like that in the States when Trump won. And wait, we did a really weird meta thing. I can't remember exactly how I did it. We recorded it after, but then we said in the podcast that we were recording it the day before. So we were doing all this, oh, Hillary's got it in the bag, man. She's gonna fucking crush. And then it had it come out afterwards as if we had, foolishly. I don't know, it was fucking weird. It was like a time travel bit.
No, I get it. That's a good bit. That's much better than our bit. That we had planned for it. I'm just gonna keep this in. Fuck it.
Well, I can, since it's the day after the election, I can reveal what I knew for months, even years, which is that Angela Merkel has been tried and executed in secret.
That was a clone the whole time, and the clone also lost. So fuck you, clone.
Is that part of Pizzagate or something? Does it spread over to y'all's neck of the woods?
The cloning thing was that was QAnon. Actually, I have no idea where it came from initially, but QAnon has definitely spread over here, especially the how do you say, the crystal moms kind of version of QAnon, of where all the spiritual healing and stuff. Fun thing about the Germans that I don't think anyone outside of Germany knows is they refuse what you would call Western medicine. The concept of it. It's frighteningly commonplace how you'll just be in a mass amount of pain or something, and they'll just give you smelling salts. And they're like, here you go. And I'm like, no, I would like an opiate, please.
Which group of people is this?
All Germans. A lot of them.
Interesting.
They basically invented homeopathy, and they're very proud of that fact.
Yeah. They were doing one thing I think is indicative is they were doing at the Corona, the anti-Corona, anti-lockdown protests, which you can maybe imagine. I think that the far right party was only the third. When they asked them who they voted for, I think the far right party was the third most common being the Green Party. So you can kind of get a sense of what this constellation of people is. Not everyone, it's a big slice of the Greens, and then a little bit of sometimes they're racist. It gets all mixed together.
Yeah, sure.
They also meditated with the Constitution. That's my favorite part. They would just sit down on prayer rugs and meditate with the Grundgesetz.
And they would play Bob Marley literally and all sing together.
Yeah.
You should, if you're ever in Germany and there's a protest going on, do not miss it. It's the event of. They've been fascinating. I want to go to more when I'm back.
That doesn't actually surprise me that much. Being from Austin, where Alex Jones is from, a lot of what he came from was his humble origins. Before he was just a problem, he was just kind of a goofy guy around town. And, the conspiracy theory stuff he was into was one of a number of little gimmicks he had. And plenty of the other ones were that you should smoke a lot of weed and, see a mind dragon and have fun and, just a little bit more harmless. So that crystal stuff, it's a lot more insidious than it leads you to believe. Yeah.
Crystals are a gateway drug. You got to be careful.
Yeah.
I saw a picture of young Alex Jones recently and it was upsetting. He was handsome and kind of put together, and now he just looks like shit, to be honest. I don't know how.
He's so round now.
He's so round. It's like I would respect it if you were pushing for some sort of like Guinness World Book of Records of like world's roundest man. This is like he's doing it.
Yeah, but, he's red too. He looks like a Geodude or something. He's just kind of all arms and head.
Hey, this is your weekly corner Späti. On the mic, of course, is Kieran, and I'm joined by Rob, still in the United States. What's it like over there, Rob?
Kind of cold today.
No, okay. Fair enough. Insightful.
That's what I'm here for.
And also joining us, a special guest from Pod of America and Why You Mad, it is Jake Flores.
Top of the morning to you. It's good to be here. That's not cultural appropriation. One of our rappers did it recently.
Oh yeah, no, don't worry. Jake asked me before we started recording. I told him he could say it. I gave him the bog pass or whatever.
yeah.
I actually know so few people who say top of the morning. I know no one who says top of the morning. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. It's the day after the election. We did a big live stream. I hope you watched it. I hope the live stream was successful and didn't like collapse at several points. I think it probably will. And the results are in, and shocking upset. Freie Wähler swinging the entire Bundestag, the entire party of weird cranks. I don't know how to describe the Freie Wähler.
Not yet, but soon. The crank parties are only going to get bigger and bigger. That's what I think. There will be more of them. And actually, I think even I don't know what will happen to all of the Boomy followers. But even they, I think, were susceptible. They were like early Pirate Party supporters, a lot of them. And I don't know how they voted in this election, but I could see them coming back around to another one of these like small parties until they just like somehow collect like 30% among all of them.
If the head of the Berlin party like chopping up his mate and stuffing him into a suitcase, if that didn't put you off the Pirate Party initially, I don't know what will. So fun stuff over here in Germany.
Wow. I am not going to pretend like I understood most of what you guys were talking about, because I'm not even a big electoral wonk when it comes to my own country, but that sounds very fun. At the very least, somebody killed somebody and they still won an election. Is that what's going on? We've had a few of those.
Yeah, the Berlin chapter of the Pirate Party, the head of the party like killed someone, and I think the story is he chopped him up and put him into a suitcase, and then like on the way to get rid of the body, he just like dropped into a shop. And that's how they caught him, because he just like had to collect a can of like soda pop or a Coke or whatever.
Yeah,
there's some fingers sticking out.
Well, you're on a road trip. You got to get beef jerky and Skittles and a Red Bull.
I mean, but it's still Berlin. It's like a road trip is like half an hour on the local train. Like, oh man, I'm hungry. Killing someone takes it out of you. Yeah, sorry for that, Jake. You don't know which ones are jokes and which ones aren't. That actually did happen. But anyway, let's see. We're actually here to give a little bit of a reprieve from talking about the German election for a very, very long time, because it's over now, presumably. And we'll probably have to talk about coalition building and stuff. And then there'll be the French election. Okay. We're going to talk about Jan BOOMER-mann. The closest thing you get to Germany in a household comedy name, which is why we have Jake on to dissect the comedian's mind. Yeah.
Probably most of our listeners, certainly all the German listeners, are aware of him. He absolutely, we were talking about it a little bit earlier, he's a bit like his latest show. Well, he's had a series of shows, but he's most famous for this Neo Magazine Royale, and then like a spin-off that's kind of similar, but it's not exactly the same show, since 2019. And especially like 2014, especially 2015, 2016, he went viral a lot, whether it's a video about Yanis Varoufakis, a poem he wrote about Erdogan that we will talk about. Kind of occupying the John Oliver role, like most specifically, like that kind of like zany. I don't particularly like humor, and then like, all right, but let's be serious for a minute, and then talking about some some issue going on in Germany. But he's like, whereas in the U.S. that's like a booming industry. I think he's really the only one in that lane at that level of fame, and so he has like an outsized influence setting, especially online, where we are too a lot, setting like the terms of like what politics means and what the what the line is on certain issues and what people should care about.
So what is your first impressions? I sent you some clips, Jake. Mostly the stuff in English. That's gone viral.
My first impression is that his name was Jan BOOMER-mann, and that made me very nostalgic about a video game that we have over here. I'm sure you have it as well. I'm an idiot, and so that made me laugh. But to be actually quite honest about what I felt about his comedy, so I guess I was thrown off a little bit because I hadn't done my homework, and for some reason I had heard recently that the right wing that we have so prevalent in our comedy in the States has been exported as well to Germany. And actually, like, a friend of a friend had mentioned to me in passing that somebody was writing about this. And so I guess I had it fixated in my head. Oh, there's like new Nazis in Germany. That's really interesting. And they're watching our comedy. And so when you had mentioned, oh, there's a German comedian I want to talk about, I think I just had a crossed wire in my head, and I was like, oh, that's what we're going to talk about. And then as soon as I started watching this guy, I realized that's not the case at all. So it's kind of more interesting now that I think about it, that there's like this, kind of like you said, like a John Oliver liberal type of comedy that is being seemingly exported to other countries because that's our other homegrown product. We kind of have these two big fighting, threads of comedy in our in our like mainstream culture. And, I hadn't thought about this in a minute, but now it's got my brain kind of reeling, because I've noticed that this also kind of exists in other countries. I mean, we export everything about our culture, and comedy is so interesting because it develops naturally in other parts of the world, in every part of the world, kind of in reaction to its own society. But because American culture is like a product that is tried and true and you can make a lot of money off of and stuff, and it's like respected and things like that, you see this happen. The first thing that's kind of popped into my head that's occurring to me that's similar to this is Mexico. So in Mexico, I mean, you had this thing for a long time where comedy was, a throwback to like vaudeville and, carnival stuff and the what do you call it, the caravan, and you just had fucking clowns on TV. And then at one point there was this ultra fast forward as if they skipped 100 steps or, skipped entire decades of what had happened in America. And there was just a Jon Stewart on Mexican TV, just sort of, raising one eyebrow and doing little voices and stuff. And it occurred to me when I was watching, these types of comedians coming out of Mexico, I was like, oh, they didn't go through all the middle steps. Somebody literally just came in with a bunch of American shit in a box. It was like, here, I'm going to show you how to do it so you can have a Jon Stewart or whatever. And so I guess when I was watching this guy, I was kind of like wondering, I mean, he's not like an op. Like, he's not like somebody who was dropped in or like airdropped in, but how did this sort of naturally fuse with this rising star in Germany and become like this, thing that probably was mutually beneficial between him and the wave of culture he was riding.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot to be said about like comedy or not comedy in general, but like particularly stand up as a very American thing, because that's the new wave of comedy that's happening now. Like he is our age, but I think his audience is mostly like a Gen X or older kind of demographic, and then the younger audience in Germany is maybe being taken over by this other comedian called Shahak Shapira, who does his stand-up in English. He just also happens to speak German. He's Israeli Jewish, so he also has this like outsider perspective on like everything that's happening in Germany, and they're like fascinated with that. He's very like America looking and stuff, but the thing you get with Jan BOOMER-mann and like a lot of his comedy, because it's a lot of like song and dance routines, and that gets to the origin of a lot of German comedy, which is cabaret. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of German artists, I think of him as almost like like an earlier generation, even though I just looked it up and he's technically younger. There's someone else we referenced on the show named Mark-Uwe Kling, who like also kind of was famous for these like left-ish like songs, and he would do it, and he has this like kangaroo character that he just does the voice for. And there were like radio shows where the kangaroo is like, I don't know, like a communist from East Berlin. And, you know, a lot of the jokes are just like, they're just like, yeah, the kangaroo has a song to sing, and then he sings songs about, you know, the SPD or whatever. And they go on zany adventures in Berlin. And that stuff was pretty popular. And that is definitely more Jan BOOMER-mann's, like, what he's coming out of. This kind of like, I think of it as almost like, not cheesy, but almost like too sincere, like too, like, well, I don't know. Sincere is not the right word, because so much of it is like satirical, but like, you're the comedy experts. You should have a word for this, but like, just Jan BOOMER-mann's like, it's so like, I don't know. I cringe a little bit, right? Like with these songs and like United States of Europe and like just the makeup and everything.
United States of Europe.
I could see like a tiny bit of a joke. I don't know. Just go.
I didn't really understand that one.
You know what?
I understood the elements that they were throwing together at each other to make it, and it looked exactly like something you would see on, you know, a short-lived Netflix series or something here. But I maybe also not understanding really what they were saying politically. I was kind of in awe of it.
We can watch it all together
that's
again.
fair.
The only thing I wanted to say was there was this show called the Heute Show, which literally means Today Show, which was basically a straight adaptation of The Daily Show. That came out in like 2009-ish. And I don't know. I feel like it didn't, I don't know. It's still going, but I don't know if it reached the level, that Jan BOOMER-mann did. And maybe it's because Jan BOOMER-mann is more like, comes out of these more German traditions. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I think for your sake, Jake, it's worth explaining the kangaroo thing more, because that's the most absurdest thing that I ever encountered.
I just dropped that in. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm so curious.
Yeah, so it was a collection of originally like short stories, like a little novel type thing, and that's where a lot of comedy can also come from in Germany, is like written form comedy.
It started as radio. It started as a Berlin radio show, I should say, but it became like nationally known as a book. Yeah.
As a book, right, yeah. Because that's also where Jan comes from. He was a radio host and, like, columnist and stuff. That's his, like, start in comedy. He went to school for, like, journalism. Never did stand-up. Never did, like, improv. Never did sketch comedy or anything. But the kangaroo thing is literally... They made a movie of it recently of... There is a CGI kangaroo, like Kangaroo Jack, but he's just meant to be, like, a Berlin dirtbag. There's literally just like lines about like, because he has this kind of like straight-laced kind of like human companion who's his like roommate or whatever, and his human companion's like a well-meaning social democrat, and the kangaroo's an anarchist. And there's literally lines in the movies like, oh yeah, it's fine, you know, you're well-meaning, but you know, until the revolution comes, I'm going to kill you, or when the revolution comes, I'm going to kill you. The kangaroo's saying this, and this is just like normal German comedy.
Well, am I supposed to love that? Because I kind of do. That sounds kind of fun.
I've read it. I've read the books. They're like, you know, it's a good time. It's very popular with like adults read it too, but it's very popular with like 14, 15-year-olds who are like, wow, this is some like radical stuff. And like, you know, Like much love for breaking into that niche.
Yeah,
System of a Down was a book.
Yeah, with a talking, smoking kangaroo. That kind of reminds me of like Fritz the Cat or something. Like I can see how that's fun for a teenager who thinks he's watching something a lot more edgy than it is.
I think I remember the review of the movie was like everyone was afraid the movie was going to be like really Trump focused because at the end the like main bad guy is this over the top property developer. But no, the property developer doesn't run for president or whatever. It's just like a property developer.
Okay, wait. So this is where Jan BOOMER-mann came from?
No, sorry. This isn't a side. This is just the grander context of German comedy.
Okay.
I think, but I do think Marc-Uwe Kling is more German than Jan BOOMER-mann, whereas Jan BOOMER-mann, because his show is so like ingrained with the internet, like funny videos and GIFs, and like he is that like I don't know what you think, Kieran, because it's not American, but it is like English language internet that like kind of dominates and starts a lot of memes and GIFs and whatever that the Germans like pick up on, and it doesn't even have to be like it can become their own thing because it's a lot of them don't use language or whatever like, and Jan BOOMER-mann absolutely like makes his comedy out of that scene, so maybe a little older than the someone who just read, probably more male dominated, just like more like Reddit guy fans, who are like, spending all the time online, and then they watch Jan BOOMER-mann, who's also like laughing about the same like old videos they found.
Oh, does he have like an online, I'm confused because he has so much online content and you can tell that this stuff is going viral, but is it fans that are online or is it like, this almost struck me as stuff that in a United States audience would be very pedestrian, and so the clips would be circulated online, but that's almost an afterthought. Like in American television, stuff is made for television, and then like if you work on a TV show, part of your job is like, okay, now put this on the internet and make sure it gets extra mileage or whatever. But if this is like an actual proper internet freak, that kind of makes a little more sense because he was doing like that Giannis Varoufakis, I'm sure I butchered that guy's name.
You
got it. Guy with a fucking lot of letters in his name that I never pronounced correctly. But that video, I know, like I made a note when I was watching it. It almost veered into like Chuck Norris joke territory, and I was like, that's interesting because that was a thing that internet dorks were into in America 10 years ago. So is this one of those things where it's trickling into another culture a decade later, or is this just a hacky joke at this point?
I think one of Rob's recurring bits is that like all memes come to Germany like 10 years late, like that we just got the I can have cheeseburger meme or whatever.
That point's so old though that was like 4 years ago. I made that point. So who knows? Who knows where we're at now? We have to keep going.
Yeah. They're just doing Harlem Shake for the first time.
Fun.
The internet has kind of served as this equalizer, and I don't know how you would describe it. So, I think you're right, Jake, that this has become internet freakish, but very quickly into. So this show, I think, starts in, if I remember correctly, 2013. The Neo Magazine Royale, he's been on like TV and radio and stuff beforehand, but he's given his own show. And it's put on to like a national broadcaster's like second channel that's meant to be for like the young and the hip and the edgy, which is ZDF Neo, which is why it's called Neo Magazine Royale. And then eventually it does so well, they put it onto the main channel. But the whole thing is that I think after the V for Varoufakis video, they're like, oh shit, we're doing internet stuff now. Because before that, and still the bulk of the show is kind of like your straight-laced, what you're maybe more describing, like John Oliver, internet circulation as an afterthought. But then I think they had so much success with the V for Varoufakis thing that they were like, fuck, we gotta do this now. And I think he's correctly captured. Because the other thing about doing it in English, that's like to do something in English in Germany is more to be like, we're youthful and cool. That's what that's kind of signaling.
Yeah.
Basically, like, we get ads for, like, oat milk here in Berlin, like, billboard ads in German cities, but written in English. Because they're like, yeah, we're the young, cool oat milk brand or whatever.
Well, also, the thrust of the jokes in a few of these videos seemed very, like, self-congratulatingly liberal and, we're not the dumb, conservative, reactionary Trump people. I mean, it was like really similar to kind of hokey American liberal comedy. So I guess some things don't change anywhere you go.
No, God, no. The other thing I like, really, if we haven't stressed enough, he basically has a monopoly on this. Like, when I was doing research, I was like, oh, he was on Seth Meyers, and then I remembered, oh, there's a Seth Meyers show in the United States. Like, I forget how many different late night shows there are in the States because there's so fucking many of them. And like, no, this is the only one. All the rest would be like aimed at maybe very different demographics of like, we're going to have like a very dry show talking about politics for like people 60 and plus kind of thing. This is the only one that's maybe that kind of like 25 to 35 or maybe 39 bracket.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The way the U.S. has late night talk shows, Germany does have like round table shows that like German boomers watch, where it's like several like an expert from the from each party, and then they like the like Sunday talk shows. They love that, where they all sit around and have a little debate.
Literally round table. It's so funny. They don't face the audience. They're on a table, and the audience are just looking at people's backs. It's great.
I mean, I don't know if it's just that I live in America and that I'm just used to the things that we have here, and I'm not noticing that plenty of American television is absurd. But when I watch television from other parts of the world, I see a round table, and I'm like, no, that's insane. You're not supposed to be doing a round table. You're supposed to be doing Maury Povich, which is normal, which is a thing that we have on TV here that is completely insane. But, to me, it's normal or whatever. So it's interesting to think about that, given, like, there's no normal. There's no, like, there's no context within which a comedian works where there's anything to grab onto.
Whatever.
Yeah. So these like exporting a John Oliver type thing or whatever, it's interesting because it's a tool that grabs you a certain market that hasn't been carved up to death in a place outside of America. It's so you see it happen a lot actually, where because like we were talking about earlier, stand-up comedy is this American art form. Here there's tons of competition to do exactly these things that have been built from the ground up here. But I've noticed there's this thing that like international type comics will do where, you'll have like Russell Peters or something like that, who's like, he claims to be sort of like the international comic, but like, who's another example? Like Sugar Sammy is this guy I met who, I don't know if you know him, but he does comedy in like 3 different languages. This is kind of his claim to fame. And because he has, I can't remember exactly what his nationality is, but he has his home country, and then also he performs in like French in Canada and in English. Instead of competing in America to try to become one of the Seth Meyerses, if you have like another country that you can just take this to and be the only person that does it, you carve out a healthy amount of real estate there. And I think it works pretty well for the comic. I'm kind of curious what the byproduct of it is for the country, though, if we are to go down the road of asking whether these things have any effect on culture,
Sure. I mean, I do want to say, just to kind of add to that point, like, I did, and the pandemic's still kind of happening, but I did like English language comedy in Berlin, which is a nice scene because like no one's trying to be famous, because that would be an insane idea. You're in Germany, this isn't going to work out.
Yeah.
But I have seen people who like start are already fluent in German, and they'll start doing English stand-up comedy, and then like a month later they're like, I'm going to try this in German, and then a month later after that they're on Austrian television, and they're just like, oh, okay. Like, it just happens really quick if you just can speak German. There is kind of like a college industry, and they are kind of scrambling for talent, but like it is also very national broadcaster oriented, so there's like less kind of competition. Like Jan BOOMER-mann being like the only show, bar some others that are aiming for different demographics, is almost by design. They're not going to, And in terms of cultural products, I don't really know. I mean, I do want to talk about the V for Varoufakis video just a bit more, because
I want to do some video analysis here. I want to pick your brains. I want to talk a little shop.
All right. Because the thing I want to talk about with that is that I think is probably his only successful joke, or definitely the most successful joke. And it's the meta level of this joke. Because the whole point of, I think, that music video was German media, particularly German conservative media, got really obsessed with Yanis Varoufakis, this Greek finance minister who didn't accept like Germany's diktats about like how the euro economy was going to like function, and Germans still get, like, a lot of German conservative types still get really upset about the idea of an ungrateful Südlander, like a southerner or whatever, like someone from Mediterranean countries, or like, you're swarthy, you just go back to catcalling and drinking alcohol, you don't know how to like run an economy or whatever. And but I think he very correctly pointed out like this weird terminal obsession, because I don't know if you saw, but at the very end of the video they have like an actual clip of Yanis Varoufakis saying something along the lines of like, stick the finger to Germany and say this is your problem now, right? Where he's giving a talk. There's an actual clip of him. The thing was that was taken out of context. That was like Yanis saying like, that's what we can't do. We're not going to do that. But because of this video, German media, like German print press, fucking lost their minds and got really pissed off. And then, like, in response, Jan BOOMER-mann makes this fake mini documentary about how, like, they faked the whole clip. That they did a fake making of where they're all, like, big, giant green, Andy Serkis green suits or whatever, just pretending to be Yanis Varoufakis, and the whole clip was faked. But yeah, I think that's the only joke that works, because the meta level of just mocking the press's obsession with Yanis Varoufakis worked. But I think it was completely incidental. Yeah,
that's pretty funny. I'm kind of operating behind a few layers of, like,
we all are, don't worry.
disconnection from this, to where I almost feel like I'm gonna look like a dork for going like, I think that was pretty funny. Some of this is, I don't hate it. Like, there's something comedically somewhat impressive happening here.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure if this was the type of podcast where we're supposed to be just like roasting the shit out of the guy or whatever, which is common in podcasting. But I'm kind of fascinated because some of this stuff works. But
you're allowed to if you want. You can go back and forth.
I know, but I'm also aware of, like, that might just be my own perspective, because I had this thing happen. I'm kind of curious, actually, as Europeans, to ask you about this. I got my hands on a DVD. This is how long ago this was. DVD copies of the IT Crowd when it had first come out. But I was in America, and me and my friends sat around and watched it, and we thought it was the funniest fucking thing we'd ever seen. And years later, I was talking to a British guy at a bar, and I was telling him, I do stand-up and stuff, and we were talking about comedy. And I asked him, like, do you guys think that show's funny? And he told me, I guess. But he said it as if he was like it was very pedestrian. He's like, that's like King of Queens or something is in America. Like, it's your parents like it, and it's actually, like, kind of dumb. And I was like, that's interesting, because I genuinely found it very funny, but I believe you that it's passé in your own experience. So, like, how does this work? Like, how does this comedy translate like that? And when I was watching this guy, I kind of, with all that in mind, I was like, I have no idea whether this is good or not. All I can go off of is there's parts of it that are kind of working. I kind of see the cleverness in some of this, but I can't tell whether it's commonplace or whatever in the context of the audience.
It's that really interesting thing that happens of, like, stacking comedy products against each other of whether they're like mainstream or cult, and like if something becomes cult, you kind of give this significance that maybe it wouldn't have if you just stacked it up. I think a good example of this for me was like the Canadian cartoon show Clone High.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Which like I viewed as like cult because no one in Ireland, bar like the friend who showed it to me, had ever heard of this show, because by the time I found it, it had already been cancelled due to riots in India based on like the depiction of Gandhi in that show.
Wait, is that why that show got cancelled?
Yes.
No.
That show got cancelled.
That's incredible.
And like in my head, that has like this cult comedy status where, yeah, you're right. Like IT Crowd was on like prime time British television or whatever. So you're just like I found it funny, but it was like, I didn't put it into the same like reverence that I would Clone High, because this was like this rare gem that I found that I had to like pirate off like a weird like Kazaa or something that gave my computer like a consuming disease. I think like if you talk to British comedy heads, they're like, oh yeah, that's mainstream. What we're really into is something like Alan Partridge, which was like very obscure and has that kind of cult status amongst British people. But like, I don't know, when you stack them side by side, I'm like, is there really any difference here?
Well, it does
personal preference.
I mean, that stuff does play into like what's going on with a guy occupying the Jon Stewart or John Oliver like position in a society's culture. So like, do people think of this guy as annoying the way American leftists think of our John Olivers and stuff like that? Or is there conversely another audience which is, analogous to our John Olivers and stuff like that? Are there people that think of him as really clever for being this like underdog who is constantly satirizing the right wing and stuff like that? I mean, because people do enjoy that when they perceive that person as being like a cool subversive figure on some level. But I just have no, feel for what the landscape is like there.
For sure.
I don't know
Rob,
what you
have
think,
any thoughts about
Kieran, but I think he still has like a broad enough appeal. I think we kind of think he's a dork, even though some of the video. I want to explain why I like some of his videos, even if I like disagree with them. Like the police son one. Maybe not unlike Graham Linehan, right? Who like with the IT Crowd. Maybe by that point he was like, already on his like fifth show or whatever. So. Maybe he's like, the appeal has worn off or something. Whereas for Jan BOOMER-mann, I want to like emphasize or clarify that like I do think that he borrowed a lot from the U.S., but the show is very German. Like it's very much talking about like German politics and like dynamics in Germany. And since like it's not a coincidence that like 2015 to 2017 is when his show blew up, because that's also like the start of a political shift in Germany. Not the same level as 2016 in the US, but like from the rise of the far right, the refugee crisis into the 2017 elections is when like people are kind of like horrified by the rise of the right and what does this mean and what do we do? And Jan BOOMER-mann absolutely like took over the lane of like the youth resistance. They don't say resistance, but like that kind of broad-based appeal. And he's still like, I don't think people are like if you were to like, take him to task for, I don't know, not being a leftist, people would be like, yeah, well, what do you expect? That's not really who he is. The second aspect of that is, because his show is still kind of like organically interacting with internet culture, there's this other guy who everyone knows in Germany now, but we never mentioned on the show, named El Hotzo. He is like a Twitter and Instagram and got famous in Germany. He's literally like, he just tweets 20 times a day and just like, just grinded his way to fame. I don't know if we want to give him a comparison, like a Brandon Wardell figure or something. But he like speaks to like vaguely leftist things like, oh, I can never move out. Oh, like, kind of like anti-racist. Probably actually, now that I think about it, maybe more in another kind of shifting context in 2020, because the George Floyd protests had ramifications here too. But my point being that like there's almost like they're all kind of included in the same family. Like Jan BOOMER-mann, his done a lot of like activist stuff too, like which is just tweeting and like telling people to like, you know, like we have to like stop using coal, and like there's these climate protests that I also was part of that he was like would tweet support out for. So like he's kind of he's maybe doesn't get in the way, and then also if like his show like nurtures like up and coming left wing voices, then that's also like, you know, maybe he's given a pass or something. But there is even a little bit of a shift from if the 2015-2017 Jan BOOMER-mann was mostly like, you know, this far right is dangerous and we have to do something. Now it's like all of the major parties are complicit. And so that led to first the rise of the Greens, and then maybe like, you know, smaller parties, which, I mean, if there's a critique of this, which I think we would both share, Kieran, of the like anyone but the major parties, is that doesn't necessarily lead to the left party. It could just lead to 5 million crank small parties which claim to be doing X, Y, or Z about, you know, we're European citizens, but then actually just have this same exact program as like if the bourgeoisie had one mind and could just write it. Like, yeah.
Yeah, the 2015 thing is worth mentioning because the second video that I linked to you, Jake, was the like Rammstein parody thing that he did called Be Deutsch, where like that's very much in response to like the huge amount of largely Afghan and Syrian refugees arriving in Germany, and certain segments of the population being classic, you know, Nazi Germans. That's his like response of like trying to depict modern Germany as this like even-handed, like pragmatic and open and welcome kind of country, which is ideology for sure because it's not that. But like there's definitely like people like him, people who enjoy his show really, really like to think that's the case, or like that the kernel of it is at least there and it can become that. Yeah, that's kind of where that's coming from.
Yeah, that's the one that reminded me so much of the way Americans tend to think of themselves as enlightened, or American liberals and things like that.
Definitely.
Yeah. The timing and the concept of that video was like, you know, art is what? It's like one part craft, one part, you know, spirit or whatever, the point you're making. And like, with some of the stuff, I'm looking at it and I'm like, at least craft-wise, this is very funny. It has timing and stuff, and it reminds me of something that could have easily come out of, like, you know, whatever studio here. Like, it could have been in like a Ben Stiller movie or something. Like, but the point that I guess they're trying to drive about this distinction that they're making between them and like the reactionary right is, I don't know. It just seems pandery to me. It just reminds me too much of, like, you know, the rally to restore sanity and stuff like that here.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Like, and also, like, the amount of, like, false pretenses this kind of goes off of just, like, because he's leading into that whole thing of everyone thinks, like, Rammstein is, like, neo-Nazi, rather than the reality is, which is Rammstein are actually incredibly anti-fascist. And while a lot of bands that look like Rammstein are neo-Nazis, they don't work with them and they'll pull out of major events and stuff. And because they're like Germany's biggest band, they have the ability to do that.
Yeah.
And like sway that kind of shit. But like, I don't know, some of these lines I do have to give credit for. I still love the V for Varoufakis line of like, we are Germans, we started 2 world wars and almost won them both. Like I do like that. Or just like the chorus being like, we have the largest gold deposits in Europe, please don't ask where it came from. Because that is stuff that I think before Jan BOOMER-mann there was just like no jokes about.
Let me ask you a question about that, because what I had always heard is that at least for certain generations in Germany, it was like really taboo to talk about the whole thing that happened. And then, like, I'm curious, did that translate to comedy in that, was it taboo to joke about where all the gold came from? And then was there like a rubber band effect where because it was so taboo, like I always imagined, okay, eventually if you make it extremely taboo to joke about something, eventually it becomes really funny and you get like edgelords that are going to poke it because you're not supposed to poke it or whatever. I mean, has any of that stuff played out, or is he the first person to be making these jokes on that large of a scale? Is that why he's funny? What's going on there?
Yeah, I think like German comedy, Rob can correct me or anything, but like German comedy before him was, I think in general, kind of hesitant to talk about anything like really big picture. There's like this whole kind of, I think on a day-to-day basis, or like especially older Germans tend to prefer comedy that's maybe a bit more like interpersonal or absurdist, where no one is really the bad guy. Like miscommunications are funny, or like pratfalls are funny, which I'm not saying they're not, but like that might be the extent of it. But that as a form of comedy does like very conveniently veer away from, you know, making jokes about where the gold come from.
Yeah, no, that is really interesting, because that is a thing that you see on my show, Why You Mad? My co-host Luisa's always talking about how rich people do that, because you know, why does a rich person want to talk about the big picture? Well, it's probably a bummer for them. They're complicit in a lot of the parts of it that are not good. So, you know, a lot of this really great absurdist, you know, surreal humor that we get out of our Adult Swim people and stuff like that is cool, but it's also like seems to be coming from this desire to want to make a really specific experience the subject of comedy and not all of experience. So that tracks to me. That's interesting.
Do you have anything to say about that, Rob, or do you think that like tracks for historical German comedy?
I think probably. I was just thinking what the Nazis would label degenerate stand-up comedy and whatnot. They probably have some strong opinions.
Like I think if they had enough time, they would have labeled it a Jewish art form or something, which it kind of is, especially in America. But like, it's okay. Yeah, it's super interesting because I think Germans are very open to that. I haven't seen like a rubber band effect, but like, I mean, you had like academics in history in Germany as late as the 90s trying to do like Holocaust revisionism, and these were like fairly senior in German universities. The problem was not dealt with, or was dealt with very, very slowly. I think comedy and TV by and large maybe served as a distraction from it if it wasn't like an expressly political talk show. That would be kind of like my take on that whole thing. Yeah, the consequences of the Holocaust have resulted in some weird things. Like even particularly like everything about like Jan BOOMER-mann's comedy is there's often this kind of like undertone of like, oh yeah, other countries can go right wing, but it's really bad if we do, as if Germany is somehow special and like no other country is capable of doing what they did, which is a very almost anti-Deutsch take, which is just like the Germans are inherently evil.
Yeah.
And only they could have done Nazi shit.
Yeah, well, there's also that Trump sketch where they're sort of saying, you know, don't do it, we did it, and it went really badly, you know, so we have this, like, wisdom or whatever from perspective, which, you know, makes sense as a joke, I guess, at least to me. The Trump jokes were god-awful and hacky, and I mean, it just makes my skin crawl because we're inundated with that stuff left and right. Well, I guess everyone is everywhere. I don't know. It's funny being in America because you keep thinking like, you know, I'm going to explain to you what's going on in America as if you don't know, because like our stuff is blasted in your face and it's not a two-way street. So it's really funny. But yeah, I mean, the Trump jokes in that one were like, I mean, do people find that funny there? I don't know.
They did. So wait, Kieran, I want to ask you, because you were in probably Scotland at the time. That was like the most viral of them. The America first, Germany second, because like every country would do a version, and like like at the office, like everyone would be like, "Oh, did you see this?" Like everyone would want to show me like the next video of the
yes.
And then they made specific ones like Baden-Württemberg second and stuff.
Like a state in Germany. Yeah. So like the horrifying thing about the America first, country second thing, that was like every country in Europe's like equivalent show did their own version. It was actually started by a Dutch show, like Sunday with Lubach, I think is what it's called. Yeah. So they're all terrible. Like I'm really sad to say, Jake, that's like maybe top 5 of them, and there was like 30 something of them from different shows across the country, across the continent.
But so, Kieran, just tying that into the United States of Europe thing, I do think it's like, because it's in English, like there's an opportunity to like for this like pan-European comedy, which is probably not good, and it probably, if anything, would lead to bad things like Volt. But do you see something like that in the, like, Böhmermann probably embodies that a little bit, even from the German perspective, but especially those videos, like, which are more recent in, like, the United States of Europe, is like, it's almost like all the jokes have to be, like, the go-to jokes of, like, the lowest common denominator of, like, you know, international jokes. Like, Germans are like this, and then the Dutch are like this, and what are the French like? But that, I'm wondering how that ties into like a potential European identity of that you spent so much time thinking about.
Me, yeah. God fucking damn. Yeah, okay, so like my main critique of that United States of Europe thing is like there's no jokes in that. I think the only joke is like he refers to his dick as his Schengen area, which is just like a really... Schengen area is the part of like Europe where there's no border checks, basically, which is a lot of Europe. It's... The whole thing is very dumb and steeped with ideology. There's a segment of German left liberals who really like the idea of a federal, as this thing says, United States of Europe, where like... somehow by all of us coming together we would make a much better country, and this is shown as example by like pointing to other large federations like United States and Russia and Brazil and being like, look how successful those countries are. Like I don't know where it comes from, but like it exists as a current here, and it's very strange because they will never, like, doing pan-European comedy, which we've I guess tried to do on the show, won't work for like left liberals because they're too afraid of going into what they think is probably the language of the right. Like they will rely on stereotypes of other countries that are considered safe, or like these are the stereotypes that those countries want you to think that they have. Like, oh, the French love butter or whatever. Yeah. Or not butter, sorry, Jesus. Bread. Baguettes. Like that kind of like really surface level hack shit. Because anything more would be deemed like offensive. Like, I don't know, I think our go-to jokes on like the French here is that they love like racism and having affairs. Like that's the kind of stuff they would not be willing to even touch, because they would see it as like, no, that will get in the way of the pan-European project because we'll piss off the French or something. It's very strange.
That's interesting. That sounds like it ultimately results in it's something that can't possibly be funny.
Yeah. Pretty much. You saw that video, right?
I think, yeah. Baguette Man and everything.
Yes, exactly.
Very subtly.
But I do think there's something... So I want to talk a little bit about the Police Son video. I'm not sure if you watched it, Jake, because it's in German, but...
I did, actually.
Okay.
I think I got a gist for what was going on.
Yeah.
So he says like 3 German words.
It's a universal language, you know?
Yeah, I speak.
It's the thing I'm always saying.
Duolingo comedy. So his dad was a police officer and died when Jan BOOMER-mann was a teenager, so he brings it up all the time. I guess like a Pete Davidson thing. So this is like
his dad died of natural causes, though. He wasn't killed in the line of duty or anything.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
And so this video where he's like, it's a parody of German rap, which already is like comedy gold for a lot of people, because it's like, isn't that so funny? They talk funny and sound dumb and use dumb words, which is a whole nother. That's a long time coming. But then in this, the whole joke, which I think is like a funny premise, like I laughed at some points of the video, which is that like, yeah, my like crew, my gang is the police, and I can call them to like, you know, run up on you. And like the reason that's so fascinating is because like kind of like the like wrongness of it's funny, you know, like loving the police. Like we, you know, there's something like like wrong about that. But I don't think he's doing this on purpose. Like in the police video, he can't leave it like, isn't it bad to love the police? And I do, because he like switches it to like these like everyday people just singing along to the chorus and being like, the police protect us. So like it veers into that. But if you had taken that out, like if he didn't like wink in that way, I would read like United States of Europe in the same way. Like, I love this force that you can just like why are you trying to resist it? Just join the like pan-European Borg, you know? It's like everything's safe, everything's fine with this like, you know, our grand protector and leader. You just have to love them. And all these people who don't love them, we have to crush. And like there's like a tiny bit of that in his videos. I don't know if he's like I wouldn't say this otherwise, but in the police video, he like the lyrics veer a little bit into being like they'll kill you. Like they'll beat you up for no reason. And it's like, but they're on my side. That's great. And like that dynamic, I think it points to like maybe like I don't know, like a boundary in his comedy that like, who knows what the future holds, but it's kind of like the left liberal, mindset, you know, when pushed on that area, they'll be like, well, I'll just join the like, you know, I'm a court jester for the most powerful force here. So like, you know, if that's the United States of Europe and that's like what we all want, like, you know, why resist it? Get on board. It means we're going to we will be protected. You know, I, Jan BOOMER-mann, and you listening, we will be respected and loved in this pan-European federation.
Go ahead, Jake, if you have anything to say.
Yeah, my brain's kind of swimming with what you were just talking about. What is the left liberal point of view when it comes to stuff like the police or like this, you know, conversation about?
So he had a whole nother video based on, because last year, over the past couple of years, there've been like just tons of like, you know, neo-Nazi cells in the police and the army in Germany, like broken up, like Telegram chats revealed and stuff. And he did a whole episode on it. And he talks about all of it. Like one of the slogans that people say about the police comes directly from Nazi Germany, like saying they're your friend and helper. And so like he goes through all that. And then at the end, he's basically like, we need to reform the police. Like they should serve us. Like they should reflect the best of society. And like that's all he can do. Yeah.
Well, what I was getting at, what I'm thinking about is liberals, like they kind of have this ability by virtue of some very deep-seated point of view to pivot between, like, you know, 1 month they say ACAB now, which is really funny in the States because that used to be a biker thing, like a punk thing. Yeah. But then also when it comes right down to it and you go, well, what should be done about the police? They pivot to this reform thing and go, well, there's nothing that can be done. And the nothing that can be done conclusion, I think, is where you then get a comedian resolving the whole conflict in that by going, well, isn't it funny to talk about how the police are essentially a reality that I like, and there's this darkness to it about how the fact that they'll kill you sometimes, and that's pretty much the end of the thought. Is like, you know, look at me, I'm a smart comedian who's able to point out darkness in these like realities, which is it's just a much a different way of looking at it than what I'm used to, which is like, no, you can change this. Like, you should be angry about cops and be like, you know, talking about how you can fucking take this shit down. But like, something about the fucking like, what else are you gonna do perspective of someone who's ingrained in, you know, a class in society that like can't really actually conceive of itself in opposition to this stuff is, I don't know. I think the comedy tells the story. It's like the tea leaves are in there. The person thinks what they think about is inevitable, and you can tell by what they're doing with like this presentation of this stuff as unmovable object, you know?
Yeah.
For sure, because like I think I was watching this with Nick earlier, like R.I.P. He whatever, he couldn't make it, but the thing that's going on with the like Ich hab Polizei, like I have the police music video is very interesting because you can totally tell the writer's process behind it. Of like the writer's room were like, okay, Deutsch rap, German rap is really into this whole like they're doing the gangster stuff that was happening in the 90s in like American rap. A lot of songs about like you can't like step up to me because I have like a whole gang backing me, right? Yeah. And then the whole joke of this is like, what if we did that for Jan BOOMER-mann, and the gang that we're talking about is the police?
Yeah.
And Nick very correctly pointed out, was like, well, they've actually stumbled on a very good point here, which is basically the police operate like a gang. And but they're doing it as a bit. They don't really, I don't think, realize that they've made the point correctly. Because like the lines in there of just like, oh, they'll beat you up, or they'll like, and you won't be like, who are you going to run to? There's no one you can run to, kind of thing. If they do this to you, is I think being played as a joke of like, I think the people writing that are like, oh, that wouldn't happen, because this video is also older than like a lot of incidents in like what Rob was talking about, the like neo-Nazi stuff.
Yeah, but he like, mentions it in the video too, though. He's like, yeah they do like they like beat up 7 people a week or something like that. There's this. I just had to send this picture. This is a screen. This is actually like so. Jan BOOMER-mann's like driving a car with sunglasses, so I guess he's supposed to like a gangster or whatever, and he has a cab. Yeah. Tattooed across his knuckles. And you see that early when he's driving. And then like a minute later, he brings his other hand up to like, have 2 hands on the wheel, and there's just an N tattooed on it. So it lines up for like N a cab, which I can only assume means not all cops are bastards. Yeah. Which is like, it's just like even that joke, like how are you supposed to reconcile that other than the fact that like, I love the cops?
Yes, no, that's 100% what this is.
But like, but he still says all the time that like, yeah, they might kill you, but gotta love the cops.
Yeah. Because I think it's also worth pointing out that like another bit that's happening in this video, if you don't know Jan BOOMER-mann, is the way he's dressed. Like this man doesn't dress like this, and the way he does dress is from the tradition of like German cabaret. Like he's the kind of guy who's like, I do comedy in a tuxedo. Kind of thing. Like this is a dinner soiree and I'm entertaining you is basically the idea of like cabaret comedy. And he's very much about that life. And his whole thing is like he's a part of the bourgeoisie, and he's like not necessarily ashamed of that. There's no like sect of this comedian, like of this style of German comedy, to be like it's okay to be punk, or you must be viewed as like an everyman even. Yeah, it's a very strange thing, but like, I'm sure that's how the police operate for you. Like, if the whole beginning of the video, he calls them up and they're instantly there to protect him or whatever, because you're a celebrity in Germany, and for reasons we'll get into in a minute, had police protection for a while.
Yeah, I think you're right, Jake. That his fundamental his humor is just I like the cops. Like, I like the, authority. You can't change it. Isn't that bad? But, at the end of the day, I like it. And I think it comes through more clearly in his German stuff than in the English stuff. I don't think it's a coincidence that, the police video is the clearest one of the ones we've talked about, and that's the only one in German.
It's also the most viewed and most popular one. That's why I included it. All right, I think we need to, before wrapping up, I think we need to talk about, maybe 2 controversies that I think are worth pointing out, because unfortunately, Jake, without this man, we wouldn't be able to podcast, and I'll explain what that means in a second. So, first thing was, one of the things that we got obsessed with when we started the show was the Ibiza affair, which was basically a bunch of Austrian politicians being duped by this actress who was pretending to be a Russian heiress, and basically saying, was basically getting to them to admit on a hidden camera that they would do all these public procurement scams in favor of just her giving them money. Yeah.
They were from the far right party too.
They were from the far right Austrian party.
Yeah. They're just knocking back Red Bulls and being like, "Do you like skiing? Do you want? do you want a chairlift company?"
Yeah. I think the joke we said at the time, they were all acting like they'd just been to the strip club for the first time and they don't realize that the stripper doesn't love them, kind of thing. It was very kind of pathetic. This caused a big scandal in Austrian politics. People's careers got destroyed and stuff like that. It was a big thing. But, like, the weird conspiracy brain people noticed that this German comedian was kind of, like, tweeting about it, like, a couple of days before it came out, when it was, like, the video was suddenly leaked. And also, when it was leaked, he had, I think it was, like, 2 days after it was leaked, he posted on his Twitter, like, a picture of him in the room where it happened, like, the holiday home that they rented it from. And I think he convinced he then put like a huge timer on his website, and I think he convinced everyone that he was going to release another angle of the same footage. But then when the timer ended, it was just like him singing, I think like Atemlos or something, like a German dance hit or something.
That's being like Rickrolled or something, probably.
Yeah. So that was like one controversy that caused some press. I'm still kind of the belief that he's managed to make it into upper echelons of society, that he can learn about a tape like this before it gets released. Because
yeah, I think so.
It was filmed
I would not be
like
surprised
a couple
if
of years
he was,
before it was released.
Yeah, I would not be surprised if he was somehow not involved in the planning but knew about it. Because as people pointed out, like this far right party had been the junior partner in the ruling coalition in Austria for 2 years at that point. So it's like, you could have sped up when they were passing all those laws, all those terrible You had to wait 2 years?
No, yeah, they sat on that video for like 4 years or something, and people were like, this party is like a direct descendant from like the Austrian wing of the SS. You could have like gotten rid of them from the government a lot sooner. That would have been nice.
Yeah. So, no, it's very fitting. Like, if he's, I don't want to be like, oh, no, you're trying to act like, Jan BOOMER-mann, you're trying to act like you're more powerful than you are. It's like, this is exactly the kind of activism I can imagine you doing. Like, do this, and then the center right, which is like really stretching the word center, Prime Minister or Chancellor Sebastian Kurz, just like he resigned and then came back with like a stronger majority in the elections. So like, good job, polite clap.
Respectful golf clap. But the main controversy I want to talk about, and the big one I think from like his Wikipedia page, and like for anyone who knows him, is the Erdogan poem he did. He had like a serious moment on his show where he talked about the like limits of comedy in Germany, and then started to read a poem about the president of Turkey, about how he's let's see what are the terms. He is oh God, what were the terms? Oh yeah, here we go. Okay, he calls President Recep Tayyip Erdogan a man who beats girls, fucks goats, and suppresses minorities. This is all in the form of a poem, and yeah, it's a weird thing because this causes a diplomatic scandal. Because for anyone who doesn't know, there's a lot of Turkish people in Germany. Or people of Turkish descent, and like literally the embassies calling up Angela Merkel, being like, "What the fuck is this? You need to stop it." They drag up these archaic laws, section 103 and 104 of the German Penal Code, which is like you cannot publicly insult foreign heads of state, and they sue him for this. Yeah. And this was back in 2016. Yeah. The TV channel he did this on like scraped it from their like records. Like they have like a Netflix style thing where you can watch like older versions of the shows. It's not on there, and things like that. It caused a whole diplomatic incident. They tried to sue him. This is the first time this law had ever been like used in Germany, and the lawsuit fell through. The laws got abolished in 2018, and then 2019 we start this podcast where we insult foreign heads of state all the time.
Oh man!
Except for the German president, you can't do that here. We all have to like the pointless head of state that is the German president. We can insult the chancellor, but not the president.
That's not real, is it?
No, that is real. Yeah, you can't insult the president.
Wow, what the hell?
He's completely powerless. Like, it's not an insult to say that. He has actually no functional power within society. He's just like
be
there
careful,
to cut ribbons.
That sounds a little to describe his job description.
I've told you once before I met him. like he visited Ireland to check out my friend's cow farm. About like, oh, this is where the beef comes from. And I was like, yep.
Man, that is bananas. That
I remember thinking he's great.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of. I know I was talking about Mexico earlier, drawing a parallel here, but you ever heard of this guy Broso in Mexico?
I have, but I think I've only heard you talk about him.
His name is Broso El Payaso Tenebroso, and it translates to Broso the creepy clown, and he is. I noticing some parallels here because, like you're saying, like Böhmermann is working in the tradition of the cabaret. Well, the reason Broso's a clown is because, but he's working in the tradition of the caravan and stuff like that. But he's putting this modern twist on all this stuff. And they call him the Jon Stewart of Mexico. And ultimately he's a lib. Like, even when what's his name? AMLO got in, I think, I was following correctly, very vaguely. I'm probably not getting this totally right, but I remember like friends of mine in Mexico saying, yeah, Broso's cool, but he's like a fucking boomer. He's like old and he's a lib and he's not all up on, he's not a fucking Zapatista or whatever. That being said, it's funny because it seems in certain parts of the world, a comedian can still be like, can serve the function of a freaking comedian, which is to, get entangled with like the government on issues of free speech and stuff like that. And, Broso had a bunch of those things happen where he had like, I think with his TV show, he did like a weird hidden camera punked thing and exposed like someone who was taking money they weren't supposed to, and it became this whole fucking thing that I don't know the details of or whatever, but it's interesting. I want to be forgiving to these comedians for being libs in some sense, because some of the comedy stuff they're doing does seem to be serving like an interesting purpose in terms of free speech and stuff like that. I don't know. I mean, it's, I'm not a free speech person in the right-wing sense or by any means at all, but it is kind of a core issue at the heart of comedy, and I do think it's cool when people get into it.
Oh yeah, like I mean, one of the things that we have to deal with here compared to like American podcasts that we take inspiration from is that libel laws in Europe are like much stronger, and by and large, because you have to have like the legal funds to actually pursue suing someone for libel, they tend to be just like mechanisms of the rich to like defend themselves or get like widely known allegations about them like expunged from the record because there's no like concrete evidence of it. Wow. Like I give you like a good example of like when like Epstein was revealed, or not Epstein, sorry, Weinstein was revealed in like 2016 or 2017 or whatever. Everyone like showed these like, montages of every like Weinstein joke ever made in like 30 Rock, where they're basically hinting that they all knew, because they probably did. And like that kind of shit would be like shut down immediately in Europe because you have no concrete evidence of it. And you'd have to wait for 2017 for anyone to really know what was going on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty fucked how like libel law in the letter of the law, you can kind of like, oh, that makes sense. That'd be nice if I couldn't be slandered publicly. But then you realize, like, because of class and stuff, the only people who ever really get to use it are people who have the money to have legal teams and pursue. Because libel law is not like a law that like a cop will stop you for. It's something you have to pursue yourself.
All right, yeah.
Yeah.
I agree that the Erdogan poem had like a bit of a breakthrough in a like because it went viral, like actually viral, like in. Like, not
like a planned sense, because the YouTube channel that's like controlled by the state, the state channel that he's on did not like make the clip. The clip was uploaded onto like a third channel, like on someone's screen capture TV.
If I'm not mistaken, it was like part of the bit to be like, this is illegal what I'm about to do, like to like
yeah, pretty much. Like he did the whitest kids you know bit, like of like yeah.
And so it worked, right? And I think. You were saying, Jake, about like the goal of comedy. I think that's like for Böhmermann, like that's like the best case scenario, because a lot of times, and I don't know if this is good or bad or just annoys me specifically, but because he has such like a devoted and like certain, I mentioned that before, like Reddit guy fan base of like online, that so much of the like very similar to John Oliver. Like, remember John Oliver got Drumpf to go, like, quote-unquote viral? Like, right. I feel like a lot of his bits just turn into that. You know, it's kind of like an in-joke in a certain, little certain stratum of German society. And that a lot of the, like, breakthrough into, you know, the society just lends itself to, like, you know, there's a satire party called Die Partei, which we kind of hate. Even though they're like vaguely left, but it's just like what you're saying before. It's like, you are literally a political party. Why is this just a joke, you know, to you? And like, you know, doing stuff like writing stuff like that, or the Pirate Party. And it's almost like they act like in a certain way, they're still like above it all, you know, even though they're like following the news constantly and watching this show, which is like, did you hear the latest from this? Like what so-and-so said? And like, they don't quite tease out that contradiction of like, we consume all this news, but, you know, we still have to have this, like, you know, hands-off approach to it sometimes.
Interesting. Yeah. And I agree with this, like, kind of everything else has been kind of comedy to square the circle of, like, we can recognize the darkness, but also not really advocate for any real change. And that kind of just, like, that puts a little neat bow on it, and we don't have to think about it again. But it's also worth pointing out that, like, the poem about Erdogan was also kind of racist, because, like, using the term goat fucker was not great to describe someone from the Middle East, or what would be considered the Middle East. I think he acknowledged that and apologized when people brought it up to him. But, yeah.
Yeah. He just said his thing, which I guess he means dick, smells like Duna, stuff like that.
Okay, that's not great. That's not great.
Yeah. I guess that's about it on Böhmermann. But if you want to talk more about, like, I don't know, the role of comedy in politics, I'm all ears. I don't know what you think, Kieran, but you know,
I mean,
we try to wrestle with this problem ourselves.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, that's the end of, like, Böhmermann's story. Like, I mean, not the end. He's still, like, on TV. His show, like I said earlier, got moved from, like, the second channel meant for, like, young kids and hipsters to, like, the main channel that everyone watches because it became so popular. Yeah. He has, like, a Spotify podcast deal, but like for the German language market,
which, like, was briefly like the most downloaded podcast in Germany, I think. They were doing daily episodes at the beginning of the pandemic, so I think they, like, shot up in the rankings.
Oh, right. Yeah. He also had the most downloaded podcast in Germany back in 2008 when he had this thing where he was, like, bullying one footballer. He just did this thing where he bullied one footballer for ages.
Yeah, I didn't really get the context of that, but it sounds like it could be funny.
Yeah, he's from like the west of Germany. He got a start in, like, Cologne, which is, like, one of the big West German cities, and yeah, he had this thing against Lucas Podolski, where he wrote a column which was just, like, in the voice of this footballer as his, like, diary, and I think basically just talking about how he's an idiot and, like, incompetent football. The footballer tried to sue. After the lawsuit, he made a podcast called Lucas Podolski. That was, again, just like a football podcast where he just, like, mocked this one footballer after the lawsuit failed. I don't really know what the deal was, but yeah, there was just, like, a whole I want to say, like, 4-year stretch where, like, Jan BOOMER-mann's early career was just mocking this one footballer. Yeah. But yeah, I guess that is the extent of Böhmermann. There's kind of, like, signs on the horizon of, like, him as the household comedy name in Germany coming to an end. Like I said earlier, like, because something happened, I think it was 2019, like, first when I moved here, Comedy Central Germany started, basically. And they started by being like, oh, here's the dub of, like, Brooklyn Nine-Nine or whatever. And then once they made that foundation, they started doing original German content, which has this huge focus on stand-up, and particularly stand-up as an American art form. Which, again, like, these are German people doing it, but this is not, like, Jan BOOMER-mann scene at all. And so they've got their darling in Shahak Shapira, who I think is like becoming like the next household name in German comedy.
We'll see, but he could cross over into the U.S. He was on Seth Meyers. The other, I actually forgot, I just looked it up, that Mark-Uwe Kling, the kangaroo guy I talked about, his last book was just translated into English, and he signed a deal with Mike Judge to do an HBO show on the book that was just canceled. I don't know.
Whoa.
Yeah. So like it was, I remember when I read that, I was like, oh, like, wow, then I guess I'll be seeing a lot of him. But I don't know what's going to happen with that.
Wow.
So there's something, you might see more of these German comedians. Stateside.
It's definitely. I think Kieran's probably right. It definitely seems like the arc of this, whether it's natural or whether it's like intentional, because the producers of this sort of stuff seem to think that this is where things are going. Is he's gonna be an old, not like an older thing, but he's, on the way out, what he's doing, this whole thing where you're like a presenter in a, the European style of comic, and like the stand-up thing is the next wave. But I mean, I feel like there's countries all over the world where like we're trying to do this thing where we're like exporting what it is to be an actual joke-telling American-style stand-up comic. And I'm like, I guess I'm wondering, has the graft taken? Like, does this actually go and run in other places? Or is it like a thing that's environment is only America, I don't know if stand-up has been happening long enough for that answer to really, or that question to really be answered. Does a third thing happen? The philosophical question at the heart of this is that, like, is comedy grow naturally out of a fucking place and a society and its culture and stuff?
Yeah.
Or not,
I think the problem is, like, I think the problem you get in that was, like, where's the control experiment? Like, we don't have a version of Germany that is like free of American influence. Like maybe if East Germany still existed or whatever, but like to like really see what their comedy shapes up to be, we have no like compare and contrast, because Jan BOOMER-mann, like Rob's saying, did take some American elements. I think he successfully incorporated it into like German tradition, but he does have an American comedian, like American-born comedian who speaks German, do like the warm-up at his show. Like if you go to the live recording of the show, a guy in Berlin called Paul flies out to Hamburg and does the like warm-up act of like, oh, where are you from? You excited to see the taping, blah, blah, blah. So there's still this kind of like very American stand-up influence there. The thing that's happening with Comedy Central that I find very interesting, or like I've seen it happen in Ireland as well, is like they'll do stand-up comedy and they're always in front of like the red brick wall, which is very particular because like a lot of German buildings weren't built with like red bricks. Like they're just doing that to make it look like it's a club in New York.
Oh wow!
Or like in the basement and stuff, and it's just like that's not what the inside of like any actual real basement venue you would go to in this city looks like. It's very strange, and it's hard to know, like, because it's. I mean, will it just like feed into the same thing? Will they just like do American style stand up, but then ultimately end up doing something like this if they become successful? It's very hard to tell. Like, there's no America free Germany to compare with.
Yeah, what's interesting is there's a language barrier, but there's some extent to where there isn't a culture barrier. Like, we're talking about this United States of Europe thing and everything, and like the whole question of nationalism and everything. But like, is the future that something that sort of like pushes all of these dynamics in certain directions, that there's just a creeping like monoculture that covers the entire globe? I'm in a real galaxy brain space thinking about this right now, because I was just reading really boring Eric Hobsbawm book about nationalism, and he's talking about how like in the early 1800s in a lot of European countries there wasn't a sense of nationalism in a lot of countries, until certain things happen. And so he sort of goes in and describes, what creates a sense of where like 90% of the fucking Joe Schmo people in a country think I am Austrian or whatever, right? And it's interesting because a lot of people weren't literate for a long time. It's something I hadn't thought about until I was just reading this. I know it's going off in a weird direction, but religion was like the thing that people thought of as the block of people that they belonged to before then a bunch of events occurred that then that changed to now I'm a Frenchman or whatever, or I'm German or whatever. So, in a long enough timeline, you can see these things, aren't static. And like, I guess I'm thinking about all that and I'm looking at stuff like culture and, comedy being one aspect of it and going, is this going to be like a thing that changes all of this stuff? Maybe this phenomenon of seeing American style, like comedy exported will look less and less weird over time because we're just going to all be doing this all over the place. And it's not so much going to feel like American culture anymore as it is just like world culture or something.
It's a strange concept, but also like speaking of like nation building in Europe, it's amazing how like so much of that still hasn't taken hold. Like one of the things we've been talking about a little bit with the Erdogan poems, like the Islamophobia, like you'd be forgiven for thinking black people don't exist in this continent because like Europe is still kind of thinking about themselves in terms of Christendom, and like the real threat is the Muslims, and therefore Turkey is not Europe, but like it kind of is. Shut up. You just think that because they're Muslim.
That's a good point. I think I was being a little optimistic there. I think we're still actually very much back in the 1800s.
Oh, the amount of inter-Italian racism that exists. Italians hate other types of Italians. It's great.
But I think there's something to be said of like, maybe this is just optimistic, but like a certain kind of, whether it's comedic culture or even like a specific program or like, even a scene that becomes more and more, transnational or cosmopolitan. But I do worry that will only happen in the present moment if it detaches from like local like styles and whatever and local traditions. And so like then you would still have this like very I don't know, unique or interesting like local perspective, but it's just not interested in like, I don't know, becoming famous or making a career out of it. Or I mean, like certainly on Twitter and social media these things happen a lot, but are they professional comedians? No, they're just they're just doing their thing. So that's a little bit of a tension. I mean, I don't know where that goes, but
I think you nailed it. That's what the present moment is. That's what that's why I hate comedy right now, is because the funniest people I know are keyed into reality in a way that is in direct conflict with, a career that could possibly sell to the audience, because the machine wants you to be, cosmopolitan.
Yes, because that will work better when we put you on the TV. That TV has to work in like, not only does it have to work in Berlin, it has to work in Cologne and Hamburg and also possibly Austria and Switzerland and everywhere else that speaks German. Like you have to be devoid of all this kind of local character, which is why I like being the English-speaking comedian in the English-speaking comedy scene in Berlin, because again, we all just sit around being like, no one is making a career out of this. This is like, we do a couple of shows, but like, if you want to be like successful as a comedian in Germany, you have to do this fucking auf Deutsch. You can't like do this in English.
You're very noble. Yeah. Your refusal to learn German.
I'm a hero. Give me your seat on the bus. But yeah, I think that will wrap us up now. Jake, thank you for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I love talking about stuff like this.
Where can people find you if they want to find you, if they don't know you already? I think they might.
If you don't, my handle on all social media is Feral Jokes. Feral like an animal, jokes like jokes. It's an anagram for my name. It's my website. It's my everything. And I have two podcasts, which you can listen to. They're both pretty similar to what we're talking about here. One of them is called Pod Damn America. I do it with a couple other comics. We talk about leftist stuff, news stuff, history, yada, yada, yada. The other one's called Why You Mad, and it's a little bit more arts and culture and stuff like that. And it's all on my website, my Twitter, and yada, yada, yada.
Nice. We'll put links to that in the description, obviously. They're good shows. I'm trying to think. Do we have anything to plug? I mean, we're recording this before the live show, but the live show's happened, so if you weren't there, sucks to be you.
Nothing yet. I think we can.
Fair enough.
But maybe soon.
Maybe soon. Things are opening up again, and we might be the biggest podcast in Berlin. It sucks that that's the case, but we might be.
But if the biggest English language one, like those German stuff, they're crushed.
Oh yeah, I'll listen to the Bullying a Footballer podcast, whatever.
Listen to the Techno podcast. That's just all bleeps and bloops.
Yeah, they have 50 million downloads a day.
All right, ciao, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.